Don't mock. I'm not a fool. Don't mock. I'm not a fool.
I just think that would be fun.
Hey there, and welcome to Dumb Leaders Podcast, episode 102. So I've noticed a trend. I've started noticing a trend among some of my clients and within my business and leadership network. And I believe that this trend has been largely delivered by the uncertainty that's surrounded us all in relation to this ongoing COVID pandemic. Now, of course, we've seen the rise of work from home and what is now being called the hybrid workspaces. So maybe a couple of days in the office, a couple of days at home. And in the early stages of this transformational shift in the workplace, I saw a lot of great intention from leaders in maintaining connection with their staff and their team. But this thing's dragged on, hasn't it? This pandemic has really dragged on. What we initially thought might be a very temporary thing, maybe a couple of months, worst case scenario, 6 months, has now ticked over the 12 months and has no sign of stopping anytime soon. So it's dragged on, and these changes that we thought were only going to be temporary now appear almost certain to be permanent in some way, shape or form. And the way that leaders, some of the leaders that I work with are responding to this is very interesting, to say the least. So these leaders 6 months ago were saying things like they trusted their team and that productivity has lifted. But now what I'm hearing is that they're speaking quite openly about the mistrust that they now have with their team. And I believe that a lot of this has been driven from the fact that they really don't feel like they have control. And it's a very recent thing that seems to have happened. And in many ways, I believe it's a bit of a reversion to type. And maybe it's fatigue, maybe it's COVID fatigue, maybe some leaders stilled themselves that this was a temporary measure and they could work with that. But now it seems, as I said, to be, this is permanent. This is permanent. By now, I suppose their natural style of leadership is starting to come through. Their natural leadership style is coming through. They're reverting back to type, and there seems to be this compelling need for control, and it's driven by this lack of trust, and it's driven by an oversupply of mistrust. And once again, we're seeing the spectrum of micromanagement starting to play a role. And everything about this is negative. Everything about this is negative because what it does is twofold. One, it forces your team, your people, to actually work longer and harder to prove to you that they're working hard. And the concept here is that they're working longer hours to prove to you as a micromanaging leader that they're working. And this creates an unrealistic expectation for them. And number two, and just as importantly, it increases your frustrations as a leader and increases your stress levels because ultimately the unrealistic expectation is not being lived up to. Now, I believe that this is almost a natural reaction. So why is this happening? I believe it's a natural reaction to the challenges that we are facing, especially the uncertainty, especially the perception of our lost control. When you consider the reality is we have little control over things external to ourselves, but our perception is that we do have control. Now, the development of your team is absolutely paramount, and more so now that you may only have that limited contact time face-to-face. But if we don't put some things into place, like development and conversations, where we wholly and solely talk about nothing else but the staff member, when we continue to solve problems for the teams instead of going through a process of trying to understand what it is that they would do, Our need and our ego to be the go-to person just keeps these levels, these things happening and occurring in the workplace. We get validated as a leader because people come and see us for a problem and we'll give them the solution. We need to think about how we empower our team. The more people come to us with a problem, probably the less trust that we would have with them. So we need to really start devoting intentional, conscious development time with our team, because our situations will not be changing for a considerable period of time. So learn how to give yourself permission to relinquish that concept of control. Because as a leader, it's your responsibility to make these workplaces work. Remember those two things. The problem is twofold. It forces our people to work longer hours to prove that they're working hard, and it increases your frustrations and stress as a leader because the unrealistic expectation that we're applying to our team is not being lived up to. Hybrid's here for a while. Let's learn how to empower and develop our team in a productive, in a powerful way. And I'll see you next week on the Dumb Leaders podcast.
Don't mock. I'm not a fool. And people who know me personally know that I am not a fool. But I won't get into the details of those. I just want people to realize that I'm not a fool. Don't mock. I'm not a fool. Don't mock. I'm not a fool.